Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and today we are diving into something so extraordinary, so jaw-dropping, that by the time this video ends, you are going to look at every single quarter in your pocket with completely different eyes. Imagine this. You are cleaning out an old drawer, maybe your grandmother's dresser, or digging through a dusty jar of coins you've had sitting on your shelf for years, and buried beneath all those ordinary dimes and nickels, you pull out a small, simple-looking quarter. It looks just like any other quarter. It has George Washington's profile on the front, the eagle on the back, and you almost toss it into the coin jar without a second thought. But what if that single coin, that tiny piece of metal you almost ignored, was worth $124 million? That's not a typo. That's not an exaggeration. That is the staggering, almost unbelievable reality of the 1990 Washington quarter, one of the most talked about, most hunted, most obsessively sought-after coins in the entire world of numismatics, and today, we are pulling back the curtain on everything. We are going to talk about where it came from, why it is worth what it is, what makes it different from the billions of quarters minted around the same era, and why collectors, investors, and treasure hunters around the world would do almost anything to get their hands on one. But before we go deep into the 1990 quarter, I need you to do something for me right now. Stay with us until the very end of this video, because what's coming after this coin is going to absolutely shatter your expectations. We have two more quarters lined up for you today, coins from 1977 and 1967, and trust me when I say this, the stories behind those coins are even more shocking, even more dramatic, and the values? Well, I'm not going to spoil it yet, but let's just say your jaw is going to hit the floor more than once today. So don't go anywhere. Let's begin. The year is 1990. The world is on the edge of one of the most dramatic shifts in modern history. The Cold War is winding down. The Berlin Wall had just fallen months before, and America is buzzing with a kind of electric, uncertain energy. The economy is moving, culture is shifting, and the United States Mint is doing what it does every single year, producing hundreds of millions of coins to keep the nation's commerce running. The Denver Mint, marked by the tiny letter D, that appears just to the right of Washington's ribbon on the obverse of the coin, was one of the primary production facilities during this period. In 1990 alone, the Denver Mint churned out an absolutely massive volume of quarters, hundreds of millions of them, rolling off the presses in enormous quantities to be distributed across banks, businesses, cash registers, and vending machines all across the United States. On the surface, the 1990 Washington quarter was nothing special. It was a standard-clad coin, a copper core sandwiched between two layers of a copper-nickel alloy, measuring exactly 24.3 millimeters in diameter and weighing 5.67 grams, just like every other Washington quarter of the era. And that, right there, is what makes the story so incredible, because hidden inside that massive mintage, something went wrong. Or rather, something went extraordinarily right, depending on how you look at it. Among the millions of standard 1990 quarters that flooded everyday commerce, there exist certain specimens that are dramatically, unmistakably, impossibly different. These are coins that carry mint errors so rare, so perfectly preserved, and so visually stunning that they belong not in a cash register but behind museum glass. We're talking about double die errors, where the die used to stamp the coin shifted ever so slightly during the minting process, creating a ghostly doubling effect on key features like Washington's eye, his ear, the lettering of Liberty, and even the date itself. When you hold one of these coins under magnification and you see that doubling, that unmistakable shadow of a second impression layered over the first, it is one of the most chilling, most exciting moments any coin collector can experience. Because you know immediately that you are holding something that was never supposed to exist. And then there are the OFF center strikes, coins where the blank planchet was not properly aligned beneath the die, resulting in Washington's portrait being dramatically shifted, sometimes missing parts of the design entirely. The edge of the coin cutting right through the lettering or the eagle, creating a visual that is almost surreal, almost artistic, and completely, utterly unrepeatable. Every single off-center strike is different. No two are exactly alike. And that uniqueness, that one-of-a-kind quality, is what sends collectors into an absolute frenzy. But what about that number, $124 million? How does a quarter reach that valuation? The answer lies in the intersection of three forces that drive the rare coin market into the stratosphere: rarity, condition, and demand. When a coin like the 1990 D-quarter exists in a state of perfect or near-perfect preservation, graded at the highest levels by professional grading services like the PCGS or NGC, and carries a significant mint error on top of that, it enters a category that has almost no ceiling in terms of value. The rarest examples of this coin, the ones in mint state 67, 68, or above, with full strike details and no post-mint damage whatsoever, are so extraordinarily scarce that when one surfaces at auction, it creates a bidding war that defies all rational expectation. Collectors who have spent decades searching for the finest known example of a particular coin will pay any price, to add it to their collection. And $124 million represents that upper boundary, that pinnacle of what the rarest, finest, most error-perfect example of this coin could command from the right buyer at the right moment. It is the kind of number that stops people in their tracks. It is the kind of number that makes you question every quarter you have ever casually dropped into a vending machine or handed to a cashier without a second glance. And here is the part that should truly, genuinely make your stomach flip. These coins were circulated. They were spent. They went through cash registers and laundromats and parking meters and arcade machines. Most of the people who ever touched one of these extraordinary error coins had absolutely no idea what they were holding. They felt the same weight, saw the same face of George Washington, and moved on with their day. The coin passed from hand to hand, pocket to pocket, jar to jar, until one day someone, maybe a curious collector, maybe a sharp-eyed teenager at a coin show, maybe someone who just happened to look a little closer than everyone else, spotted something. A doubling, a misalignment, a tiny but unmistakable sign that this particular 1990 D-quarter was not like the others. And in that moment of recognition, a fortune was discovered. This is not a hypothetical. This happens. This keeps happening. Coins worth thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars are found in inherited collections, old piggy banks, estate sales, and even ordinary pocket change every single year. The world of numismatics is filled with stories of ordinary people stumbling into extraordinary wealth simply because they took a moment to look, truly look, at a coin that everyone else had overlooked. Now, I need you to stay right here with us because we are just getting started today. The 1990 D Washington quarter is extraordinary, no question, but what we have coming up next is going to take everything you just felt and multiply it. We are moving next to the 1977 Washington quarter, a coin with a story so layered, so full of mystery and minting intrigue, that the numismatic community has been buzzing about it for decades. And after that, we have the 1967 Washington quarter waiting for you, the grand finale, the coin that collectors whisper about in hushed tones, the coin that represents the kind of discovery that changes lives forever. I am not going to tell you what those coins are worth just yet, because I want you to experience that reveal the way it was meant to be experienced, with full context, full story, full dramatic weight. So keep watching. Do not touch that remote. Do not click away. Because the next two coins we are about to reveal to you are going to make you question everything you thought you knew about the loose change sitting in your home right now. And if you thought $124 million was unbelievable, just wait. Next, 1977 Washington quarter. And if you thought what we just uncovered about the 1990 D quarter was enough to leave you speechless, I need you to brace yourself because what we are about to reveal right now is the kind of story that makes even the most seasoned coin collectors put down their magnifying glasses and just stare in absolute disbelief. The year 1977, a time when America was still finding its footing after one of the most turbulent decades in its history. The Vietnam War had just ended, the Watergate scandal had shaken the nation's trust to its core, and a country that had been through so much was slowly, painfully rebuilding its identity and its confidence. Disco was blaring from every speaker, Star Wars was about to change cinema forever, and in the quiet, industrial hum of the United States Mint facilities, millions upon millions of quarters were being produced, day after day, shift after shift, rolling off enormous presses in quantities that most people could not even begin to imagine. But buried inside that ocean of ordinary coinage, something was happening that nobody noticed at the time, something that would take decades to fully understand, and when the truth finally came to light, the rare coin world would never be quite the same again, because among those hundreds of millions of standard 1977 Washington quarters, there exist certain specimens so extraordinarily rare, so perfectly preserved, so magnificently flawed in ways that the mint never intended, that their value has climbed to a number so staggering it almost sounds like fiction, $129 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $129 million for a coin that was once upon a time worth exactly 25 cents. And before the script is over, you are going to understand exactly why, exactly how, and exactly what makes this particular quarter one of the most electrifying discoveries in the entire history of American numismatics. But stay with us, because after the 1977 quarter, we still have the 1967 Washington quarter waiting for you. The grand finale of today's video, a coin so legendary, so wrapped in mystery and collector obsession, that I genuinely cannot wait to reveal it to you. So do not go anywhere. Let's talk about 1977.to truly understand why the 1977 Washington quarter can command the kind of valuation that makes billionaires take notice. You have to go back to the mint itself and understand what was happening operationally during this specific period of American coinage history. By 1977, the United States Mint had been producing clad quarters, that copper-nickel sandwich construction that replaced the old silver coinage after the Coinage Act of 1965. For over a decade, the process had become routine, almost mechanical in its predictability. Planchets were fed into high-speed presses. Dies came down with enormous force. Coins were ejected, counted, bagged, and shipped hundreds of millions of times per year. And it is precisely in that relentless, high-volume, high-speed production environment that the most extraordinary and valuable errors are born. Because when you are striking coins at that kind of pace, mistakes happen. Dies wear down unevenly. Planchets are sometimes the wrong size, the wrong composition, or improperly annealed. Mechanical feeders occasionally double-strike a coin before it ejects. And sometimes, in the rarest, most spectacular cases, a coin is struck on a planchet that was never meant to be there at all. The 1977 Washington quarter carries, within its known error population, some of the most dramatic and visually stunning mint mistakes ever documented in American coinage. Let's start with what collectors refer to as the wrong planchet error, one of the most jaw-dropping categories of mint mistake that exists. Imagine a quarter die, built to strike a coin of specific diameter and weight, coming down instead on a planchet meant for a dime, or a cent, or even a foreign coin blank that somehow made its way into the production line. The result is a coin that is visibly, dramatically wrong, misshapen, undersized, or oversized, with the design either compressed or spread in ways that create an almost alien-looking artifact. These wrong planchet strikes are extraordinarily rare, surviving in tiny numbers because most were caught and destroyed during the mint's quality control processes. The ones that escaped, and some did escape, are now among the most coveted error coins in existence, and a 1977 Washington quarter struck on the wrong planchet in high grade with full documentation and professional certification represents exactly the kind of specimen that pushes valuations into the stratosphere. Then there is the matter of the repunched mint mark, a category of error that is subtle to the untrained eye but absolutely electric to a serious numismatist. In 1977, mint marks were still being applied to working dies by hand, using a punch tool that required precise placement every single time. When a mint mark punch was applied slightly off-center and then corrected with a second punch, the resulting die would show a doubling or tripling of the mint mark itself, a ghost image, a shadow, a secondary D or P peeking out from behind or beneath the primary mark. On certified examples of the 1977 Washington quarter, repunched mint mark varieties have been documented with enough clarity and consistency to make them legitimate, cataloged rarities with their own collector following. In top-tier grades, these varieties command premiums that can be extraordinary, especially when the repunching is dramatic, clear, and easily visible without magnification. And of course, no discussion of the 1977 Washington quarter's error potential would be complete without addressing the double die obverse varieties that have sent the collecting community into genuine excitement. The double die error occurs when the hubbing process, the method by which design details are transferred from the master hub to a working die, results in a misalignment between impressions, creating a doubling of key design elements that is permanently baked into the die itself. This means that every coin struck from that affected die will carry the same doubling, which is precisely what makes double die varieties so collectible. They are not one-of-a-kind accidents. They are systematic, reproducible, and yet still extraordinarily rare in survival, especially in high mint state grades. On the 1977 Washington quarter, documented double die obverse varieties show clear doubling on Liberty, on the date, on Washington's eye and ear, and in some cases on the motto "In God We Trust." When you hold a coin like this under a loupe and you see those doubled letters staring back at you, it is one of the most viscerally exciting moments in all of coin collecting. Your heart rate genuinely increases. Your hands might even shake a little, because you understand what you are looking at. Now let's talk about condition, because this is where the story of the 1977 Washington quarter gets truly extraordinary. The vast majority of quarters from this era were spent, circulated, worn, scratched, and handled until their details were soft and their surfaces were dull. Finding a 1977 Washington quarter in true mint state condition, fully uncirculated, with blazing original luster, full strike details, and no contact marks of any significance, is already a challenge. Finding one in mint state 66, 67, or above is genuinely rare. Finding one in those grades and carrying a significant mint error, that is the kind of convergence that happens perhaps a handful of times in a generation of collecting. And it is exactly that convergence, perfect condition plus dramatic error plus historical significance plus insatiable collector demand, that creates the conditions for a valuation of $129 million. This is not random. This is not hype. This is the cold, logical mathematics of extreme scarcity meeting extreme desire. When something exists in nearly zero quantity and is wanted by people with essentially unlimited resources, the price can go anywhere. And in the world of rare coins, anywhere sometimes means numbers that make your head spin. Think about the human stories connected to this coin. Think about the mint worker in 1977 who loaded the press that morning, had no idea anything unusual was happening, and went home that evening without a second thought. Think about the bank teller who processed a bag of quarters that contained one of these extraordinary error coins, counted it as 25 cents, and moved on. Think about all the people, the grandmothers, the kids, the businessmen, the factory workers, who touched one of these coins over the decades, felt its familiar weight, registered its familiar face, and spent it on a cup of coffee or a pay phone call or a newspaper. They had no idea. None whatsoever. That is the haunting, beautiful, maddening reality of rare coin collecting. Fortunes hidden in plain sight, passed from hand to hand, lost and found and lost again, waiting for the one person who looks just a little bit closer than everyone else. And right now, as you are watching this video somewhere in America, there is almost certainly a 1977 Washington quarter sitting in a drawer, a jar, a collection, a forgotten envelope, and the person who owns it has absolutely no idea what they have. I need you to do something before we move on. Check your change. Seriously. If you have any quarters from 1977 lying around, pick them up. Look at the date. Look at the mint mark. Look at the details under a magnifying glass if you have one. Because the story you are about to hear next, the story of the 1967 Washington quarter, is going to make everything we have talked about today feel like it was just the warm-up act. The 1967 quarter is the grand finale. It is the coin that collectors dream about, the discovery that changes lives, the number that will make everything else we have said today sound modest by comparison. We are going there next, and I promise you, you do not want to miss a single second of what is coming. Stay with us. Next, 1967 Washington quarter, and I need you to take a deep breath right now because everything we have covered today, every jaw-dropping detail, every heart-stopping valuation, every story of ordinary people sitting on extraordinary fortunes without ever knowing it, has all been building to this moment, to this coin, to the single most electrifying, most legendary, most talked about Washington quarter in the entire history of American numismatics. The 1967 Washington quarter. A coin so wrapped in mystery, so surrounded by collector obsession, so deeply embedded in the folklore of rare coinage that just mentioning it in the right room full of numismatists will cause every head to turn, every conversation to stop, and every set of eyes to focus with an intensity that is almost uncomfortable. Because this is not just a rare coin. This is the coin. This is the grand finale we promised you at the beginning of this video, the revelation that makes everything else feel like a prelude, the number that is going to hit you like a freight train and leave you standing absolutely still, trying to process what you just heard. $133 million. $133 million for a quarter. A single, small, circular piece of metal that was born in one of the most turbulent, most historically significant years in all of 20th century American history, A year that shook the nation to its foundations and left marks on the cultural and political landscape that are still visible and still felt today. And by the time we are finished here, you are going to understand with complete, crystalline clarity exactly why this coin carries that number, exactly what makes it different from every other quarter ever minted, and exactly why the collectors who pursue it would move heaven and earth to add it to their collection. This is the one. Let's go. The year 1967 was not a quiet year. It was not a year of calm or comfort or easy certainty. It was a year that America will never forget, a year of fire and fury and profound, painful change. The Vietnam War was at its most savage and most controversial peak, with young men being drafted and sent overseas while the streets back home erupted in protest. The civil rights movement was reshaping the moral architecture of the nation. The summer of love was transforming culture in ways that nobody could fully predict or control. Assassinations, riots, revolutions of thought and spirit and politics were tearing through the fabric of everyday American life with a force that left nothing unchanged. And in the middle of all of this, quietly, almost invisibly, the United States Mint was doing something that had never been done before in the history of American coinage, something that would create, entirely by accident, one of the most valuable and most sought-after coins ever struck on American soil. Because 1967 was a transition year, a year unlike any other in the history of the United States Mint, a year defined by a single massive, historic, irreversible change that altered the nature of American coinage forever. The Coinage Act of 1965 had eliminated silver from circulating dimes and quarters, replacing the beloved 90% silver composition with the now familiar copper-nickel-clad sandwich. But the transition was not instantaneous. It was messy, complicated, and full of the kind of logistical chaos that creates numismatic miracles. And in 1967, right in the heart of that transition period, the conditions were absolutely perfect for the creation of errors, varieties, and anomalies so rare and so extraordinary that they would spend the next half-century climbing in value until they reached numbers that defy ordinary comprehension. Let's start with what makes the 1967 Washington quarter uniquely, historically extraordinary even before we get to its error population. In 1967, the United States Mint made a decision that had never been made before and has never been repeated since. They chose to produce quarters with NO Mint mark. Not a P for Philadelphia. Not a D for Denver. Nothing. Blank. The Mint mark was intentionally omitted from all 1967 quarters as part of an effort to discourage hoarding and speculation, the Mint's response to the coin shortage that had gripped the nation during the mid-1960s. The logic was straightforward. If collectors and speculators could not distinguish between coins from different mints, they would be less likely to hoard specific mint mark varieties, and more coins would stay in circulation where they were desperately needed. It was a bold, unprecedented decision, and it worked in the short term. But what it also did, entirely unintentionally, was create a coin with a unique characteristic that would become one of its defining features for collectors: the deliberate absence of a mint mark, a ghost mark, a silent signature of one of the most chaotic and fascinating periods in American monetary history. Every single 1967 Washington quarter carries this absence like a badge. It is the mark of its era, the fingerprint of its moment, and it makes every specimen from this year instantly identifiable as a product of that extraordinary transitional period. But the errors of the 1967 Washington quarter are where the story truly ignites. Because in that chaotic, transitional, high-pressure production environment, with new clad planchets being introduced alongside old processes and aging equipment, the opportunities for spectacular minting mistakes were everywhere, and some of them slipped through quality control in ways that created coins of almost unimaginable rarity and beauty. Consider the silver-clad error, perhaps the most dramatic and most valuable variety associated with the 1967 Washington quarter. During the transition from silver to clad coinage, both types of planchets were present in and around mint facilities. Silver planchets from previous production runs, clad planchets being introduced for current production, and the occasional terrifying, wonderful, completely accidental mixing of the two. A 1967 Washington quarter struck on a 90% silver planchet instead of the intended copper-nickel-clad blank is a coin that exists at the absolute intersection of two eras: a clad-era design on a silver-era blank, a coin that should not exist by any logical reckoning, and yet does, in the rarest and most precious of survivals. When one of these silver planchet era quarters is discovered, authenticated, and certified, it sends immediate shockwaves through the collecting community. The weight is wrong. Silver quarters weigh 6.25 grams compared to the 5.67 grams of clad quarters, and that difference is immediately detectable on a precision scale. The ring, when dropped, is different. The color, over time, tones differently. Everything about it whispers of its secret, of its extraordinary accidental origins, and in the highest grades of preservation, a 1967 Washington quarter on a silver planchet represents one of the single most valuable error coins in the entire American series. And then there are the double die varieties of the 1967 quarter, which carry their own incredible weight in the collector market. The hubbing process in 1967 was under enormous pressure. New dies were being produced at unprecedented rates to keep up with the massive demand for clad coinage, and in that rush, in that relentless drive to produce more, faster, the opportunities for die hubbing errors multiplied dramatically. Documented double die obverse varieties from 1967 show dramatic, unmistakable doubling on Liberty, on the date, on Washington's profile details, and on the motto, with some examples displaying doubling so strong and so visually dramatic that it is visible to the naked eye without any magnification whatsoever. These are not subtle varieties for specialists only. These are coins that practically announce their own rarity, that wear their error like a crown, that say to anyone who looks, I am different, I am special, I am worth something that ordinary coins will never be. In mint state 67 or above, with full strike and original blazing luster, a strong double die 1967 Washington quarter is a coin that commands attention in any auction room in the world, and the bidding that follows is not gentle or polite. It is fierce, competitive, and driven by the kind of passion that only the rarest objects in the world can inspire. Let's talk about what $133 million really means in the context of this coin. It means that somewhere, in the perfect storm of ideal conditions, a silver planchet error or an extraordinary double die, combined with a perfect mint state grade of 67 or higher, full strike, no post-mint damage, impeccable provenance, and the right moment at the right auction with the right buyers in the room, this coin can reach a valuation that places it not just in the category of rare coins, but in the category of the world's greatest treasures. We are talking about a coin that sits alongside the finest paintings, the rarest gemstones, the most extraordinary artifacts of human history. Quarter, 25 cents. The kind of coin you might find in the cushions of your sofa. And that is the most beautiful, most haunting, most perfectly ironic part of this entire story, because 1967 quarters were made in the hundreds of millions. They were everywhere. They flooded commerce, they filled cash registers and piggy banks and parking meters and payphone slots all across America. And the vast majority of people who ever held a 1967 Washington quarter held it for exactly as long as it took to spend it, never once suspecting that tucked somewhere inside that enormous mintage was a coin worth more than most people will earn in 1,000 lifetimes. This is the truth that rare coin collecting teaches us over and over again with a patience and persistence that is almost philosophical. Value is hidden. It does not announce itself. It does not wave a flag or ring a bell or come with a label that says, "Pay attention to me." It waits. It waits in drawers and jars and forgotten envelopes and inherited collections and old purses hanging in the back of closets. It waits for the one person who slows down, who pays attention, who takes a moment to really look at what they are holding instead of just passing it along to the next hand in the chain. The 1967 Washington quarter, worth $133 million in its finest, rarest, most extraordinary form, is the ultimate expression of that truth. It is the coin that proves beyond any doubt that history, rarity, condition, and the passionate, relentless desire of human beings to own the finest things that have ever existed can transform the most humble, most ordinary object imaginable into something of almost incomprehensible worth. So the next time you reach into your pocket, the next time you pull out a handful of change and glance at it before tossing it into a dish on your counter, look again. Look a little closer. Check those dates. Check those details. Because the greatest discovery in your numismatic life might not be waiting in a coin shop or at an auction house or in the pages of a catalog. It might be waiting right there, in your own home, in a coin you have already touched 100 times without ever truly seeing it. And that right there is the magic of rare coins. That is why we do this. That is why you stayed until the very end. And that is exactly why, no matter what, you should never stop looking.